And so if we're meeting for the first time, my name's Ken Edmonds, and on this channel, I provide information for those that travel with challenges and for the friends and families that travel with them. Today, I have with me a fascinating guest. Her name is Ashley Olson, and we're going to talk about wheelchair travel. So Ashley, you want to give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll start talking about some destinations.
Hi, so happy to be here, and of course talking about travel, which is one of my favorite topics of all times. I started this website, wheelchairtraveling.com, in 2006. I had been already traveling in a wheelchair for a number of years. I was paralyzed in 1996 in a car accident when I was 14 years old, and never lost, the thrill of adventure and curiosity for life and how can I do things and, what can I see and how am I going to make this work? So after I became paralyzed and when I was in college and still having this thirst to explore, I decided to develop a website, wheelchairtraveling.com, while I was actually simultaneously working at a full-time job, just to, start reporting what I saw and my experiences, because I found over the years, if I would call a hotel or a visitor center, for example, I would get some information. Sometimes it would be accurate, sometimes it wouldn't be accurate, but a lot of time there would be huge gaps of information or just a lot of things that I wish I would have known ahead of time. And so I started just to document my travels as a way to just keeping a log. So next time I went back to a destination, for example, Lake Tahoe, I didn't have to remember, oh, what was that hiking trail that I found that was actually accessible, or what was that one hotel that I should completely avoid? I wanted just to keep a record so I could remember. And then, of course, share that information with other people, so then other people wouldn't have to, again, like go through hours and hours and hours and hours of research and making phone calls and getting some information that wasn't accurate. And so after I got the website going and everything, I decided to quit my job and kind of go after it full time. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So my foot is in all different kinds of areas when it comes to traveling, working with the National Park Service, which is a huge passion of mine. Love the outdoors. But I also work with hotels. I do a bunch of videos, just any and everything, interviews to try to just prepare people knowing what to expect so they can make the decisions based on what their needs are. Because one of my main reasons also for creating the website was that I wanted it to be a platform, not just information that I was sharing, even though that's how it started, because that's what I was just technically, physically capable of doing. But even from the get-go, I really wanted to open up the website to be a platform so any and everybody around the world could actually share their interests, their perspectives, how they, got over cobblestones, or how they were able to get over some of these challenges and barriers using certain tools or mindsets or little adaptions or tricks that they learned along the way, because we all have different interests, we all have different abilities and needs and wants and desires, and there's things that we're willing to put up with and things that we're not willing to put up with. So I just wanted to be as objective as possible, putting information out there, pictures, here's how wide things are, this is what the bed looks like, this is what the room looks like, this is how long the trail is, so you can make up your own mind about whether or not it works or doesn't work for you, in a nutshell.
Yes, and it's interesting because I when we talked before the interview that I'd mentioned that I got started doing what I do because I couldn't find all the information I want, and so it's nice to meet a kindred person, someone that that has the same kinds of passion I do to help others. My wife's fortunate; she's not confined to a wheelchair, but she travels with it, and there's some challenges, and if you're not expecting them, they can become a real problem. So let's talk about, because the U.S. is pretty, I won't say cut and dry, but in general, the U.S. is fairly easy. But let's pick some of the places.
Well, I have to disagree on that. Okay, and I really have to disagree on that. Yes, I've definitely found over my years that the U.S. varies drastically in terms of access. I mean, maybe if you can stand up and you can walk a little bit, like access, yeah, is pretty cut and dry. But if you can't, there are definitely some limitation and barriers, depending on city to city, state to state, town to town, you're going to run into different situations.
Okay, so
So
you've
even though
corrected me
even though
already.
there's this
That's fine.
Yeah, even though there's this ADA law, just because there's a law doesn't mean people follow it, and doesn't mean people follow it entirely exactly, and doesn't mean that they follow it, when there's an update like the 2010 amendment to the ADA, which means, pools have to have a lift, if they meet certain requirements and such. There's still places that are just not following, every guideline as intended.
Well, and it's interesting because I have on my channel, I have a video of New Orleans down close to the French Quarter. And, in theory, you would say that the sidewalks are accessible, except that they're
No,
like,
no. Yeah, no, they're very slanted in the cobblestones. So that definitely can add with like shifting, and that can be very uncomfortable for somebody in a manual chair or even in a power chair. If you're just sitting all day slanted, that could, cause them a lot of discomfort. So those are definitely the kind of things we need to know.
Yeah, well, I'd say it did take out a couple of cobblestones along the way, and it becomes, if you're not watching, and usually I'm pushing my wife so she doesn't have to push, but sometimes I get distracted and I am not watching exactly where the wheels are, and it's like, oh, that was a bump we didn't mean.
Yeah, but I mean, not even just sidewalks. I mean, I'm talking about like post offices that I've seen like in the United States that don't have a ramp, that don't have access. A post office, which I think is high on the level of terms of accessibility. I'm talking public restrooms. Sometimes I've even been to a restroom. I remember in South Carolina, went to an art museum there, and they had an automatic door, and they had all these signs, wheelchair access, and they had wheelchairs you could rent and an elevator. So I'm already thinking this place is going to be great for access. Go around the whole museum, have a nice 2.5, 3 hour visit there, and before I leave, I say, hey, I'm going to use the restroom before I leave. Go to the restroom, there's a big sign there, it's accessible. Even on the handicap stall, there's a big sign, that says wheelchair on it. I open up the door, I see the grab bars, I get in there, try to close the door in my tiny little manual chair that's maybe 22 inches wide, very tiny manual chair, and I couldn't. I was even up on one wheel, like push myself up on one wheel, balancing on one wheel, try to close the door because I had to go, and I couldn't do it. I could not close the door. So there's things like that yes, I mean, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors too, that you may think everything's accessible, but in actuality, it's not.
Yeah. Okay, so now that you got me corrected, let's talk about Greece. So you've made a land trip to Greece. So tell me what you thought about Greece. What was accessible, what you saw there that you enjoyed, that worked well. So if somebody is going and has mobility challenges, what are some of the things that they would want to put on their list? And maybe what are some of the things that take off your list?
Well, Greece has definitely become a lot more accessible since I went there. It was actually my first international trip, being in a wheelchair. So it was a huge trip for me. It was right out of high school, a group of friends of mine and some teachers. We went there as like a graduation trip and just had an absolute blast. We had a big bus and everything that we rented, and my friends would piggyback me, to get on and off the bus. And during that time though, again, this was before the Olympics, there was no access in Greece. I'm saying no access whatsoever. Throughout the entire trip that I was in Greece, I found one ramp. And there was a picture of me on this ramp, and I was just so excited that I found this one ramp. But bathrooms, curb cutouts on the sidewalks, nothing was accessible. So my friends were, picking me up off the curb. Anytime I had to go into a restaurant, I had to get a piggyback. They had to take apart my wheelchair, put it back together, once they were inside the building, and then sit me back down. It definitely was a huge challenge. And I'm happy that it was my first international trip, and my first trip, after becoming paralyzed, because it was super tough. But it definitely opened up my eyes in terms of, what the whole world is like, and, how people get around accessibility. And actually, I remember on that trip, it was towards the very, very end. I hadn't seen one single person in a wheelchair. I saw maybe like one, possibly two, elderly parents being pushed around by their, family, but I didn't really count that. I was looking for somebody who was mainly just, living an independent life, out and about, just hanging out with friends or just doing what people normally do. And it wasn't until like the second to last day that I did find somebody, and I asked him, I'm like, how do you get around? How do you do this? But he didn't speak English, I didn't speak Greek. And so, there was an obvious language barrier, but we got a picture. But I was just absolutely shocked on how inaccessible Greece was at the time. But now they've definitely made a lot of improvement. Curbs cutouts, public restrooms. When I even went to the Acropolis, one of my girlfriends carried me up, piggybacked me all the way up. And that was before they had an elevator, but now they have an elevator there, which is fantastic. So there's been a lot of really great positive changes in terms of Greece and accessibility. You're still going to run into, problems with older buildings, in certain access ways, but they have made ways where they've, put ramps, over older thresholds, to create access, or maybe there's a back way. So don't necessarily give up if you see the main entrance and say like, oh no, it's not accessible. Ask, because there always might be a side entrance or a back entrance that they have made accessible that you can get into and possibly see some behind the scenes action that other people don't get to see.
Yeah, well, very cool. So we know that Greece used to be a challenge. It's better. But and what I find is that, and again, I see things through a little different lens, is that in a lot of countries, there are a lot of challenges. We were in the Caymans recently and ran into some challenges in the Cayman Islands, places you couldn't get easily. Lots of curb cutouts, I think for my wife and I, are the thing that we run into most often. That and bathrooms that you can't. And
Yeah.
we're gonna come back. I'm gonna have you tell me your story about the ship bathroom that was accessible. We'll come back to that later. Okay, so tell me about. You said you knew a lot about Germany, so tell me about Germany and travel there.
Yeah, so I mean, like Germany, then was my second international trip when I was in college. And just to go a little bit back about Greece, the one thing that kind of shocked me that I wasn't expecting about Greece was the handheld shower nozzles. Every hotel that I stayed at had a handheld shower nozzle, no matter what, which was, a pretty standard thing, I guess, in Europe. Maybe not every single country in Europe and every single part, but I think generally a lot, it seems to be the tendency to have the handheld shower, which isn't common in the United States, only for the handicap rooms. So it was really great, like a really great surprise to see that normal rooms would have these handheld shower nozzles. So what I actually found doing was, even though maybe there was a stand-up shower, and I couldn't really get in that, even though sometimes I would, put on a bathing suit, crawl in and out kind of thing if my girlfriends had to help me. But I found that if I just transferred onto the toilet seat, well, there was my chair, and the whole bathroom was kind of like a drain. So I just used that to shower on, and the handheld shower nozzle reached and boom, made it work. Even though there wasn't officially a shower bench or wasn't officially accessible, I made it work. And I mean, if the toilet, wasn't close enough, then we would get like a plastic chair from, outside somewhere, a patio chair or whatnot. And that definitely improved things a lot. So that's a good little trick if you run into that situation. Now in Germany, again, this was my second international trip, and this officially lit the fire in me to start wheelchair traveling, because after going to Greece and finding it not very accessible, I was a little nervous about going to Germany. I was thinking that maybe it was going to be exactly like that experience. But I was so pleased to find, for example, that they had a hotel that had a wheelchair accessible room with a huge roll-in shower and a bench and a handheld shower nozzle. Was not expecting that. And this was even before even any international accessibility laws. So these are people, they were creating access just because they saw the value in it. They saw that, yes, we want to include everybody. We know some people have, mobility issues. So yes, we're going to accommodate them. We want their money too. Smart business people. So I was really pleased when I went to Germany. I've been there a couple times to find that yes, handheld shower nozzles and bathrooms were definitely a part of the norm, which is really fantastic. But then what I also found really great in Germany was the transportation system, which was surprising to me. Now, this was my first, my second time in Europe, but this was my first time experiencing transportation in a different country that was accessible. So even though maybe not every single station was accessible, like they didn't have an elevator or ramp or whatnot, it did indicate to me which stations were accessible, so I could plan, how I was going to get around a lot better. Now, I do remember this one particular time, though, that me and my girlfriend wanted to see this attraction, and the closest accessible station was like a good 45-minute walk, from where we wanted to go. So we were just going to wing it. We were just going to see what happened. So we got to the non-accessible station and we got off, and then I wheeled myself to the edge of the stairs, and then I just looked like a deer in the headlights. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And fortunately, there was, people that came by or like, hey, do you need help? And down and took care of it. So I definitely will, I'll rely on people sometimes, when I do travel, but that's just me. Some people, whether it's uncomfortable mentally or physically, that's perfectly fine. But for me personally, I'm okay with being manhandled, in certain situations if need be. Now, but still also in Germany, it was really great one day. And this is a good example on kind of going with the flow with traveling in terms of accessibility. Now, like I said, in Germany, not every single station was accessible. So there was one day, again, we wanted to go to this attraction, and we got off at the nearest stop, which was still like a good, maybe at least 20 minutes away from the attraction. But because of that, we ended up finding this amazing local, like, festival, harvest festival fair that was going on, with music and artists and all these crafts and booths, and selling all sorts of like artwork, and it was all local stuff, super, super, super local, like hidden little spot. And we would have never found it if we weren't forced to like really wander through the streets and meander and really try to figure out how we were going to get to this one attraction. And I'm not even sure actually if we got to that attraction that day, because all I remember from that day was just that festival and just being so immersed in it, in the music and the food. And I remember there was all these old photographs, all these old German photographs from like, 1910, 1920s, 1930s. And me and my friend were just for hours looking through them and finding pictures that actually kind of looked like her and I, so that was kind of fun, picturing that. And it was just such a good memory, and you can't plan for those types of moments. So if you're open and you're willing, you're like, oh no, like this isn't accessible, so boo. It's like, wait, what is the world gonna give to me now? Let's be open, to different opportunities that might arise. What's, is there bread that I smell wafting around the corner? Or do I hear music playing? Like, let's try to be a little magical and adventurous and, follow those senses, because I feel like those are when some of the magical things of travel happen. Which actually reminds me of another story that I actually want to talk about with Greece that also is very similar into kind of going with the flow. So I've been traveling around Greece. We went on land and also many of the islands, and I believe we were on Mykonos. And we'd already been to a couple islands, and during that day, we had been wandering around the island a little bit during the day, which was very difficult because it was hilly and cobblestones. So even though I had a friend pushing me and I was wheeling, it was difficult. It was definitely difficult for me, and just bumpy and tiring for me. And it was not the very beginning of the trip. It was kind of like the middle end of the trip. So I was definitely, feeling a little more tired. And towards the late afternoon, the tour group is getting ready to get everybody to, go see another attraction and, go for another hike through the city. And I was just like, you know what, guys, like, I need to call this one. I don't want to be pushed around like anymore. I'm just going to sit right here at this cafe and, call it a day. Like, I hope that's okay with everybody. Please, like, everybody go ahead, enjoy yourselves. Don't worry about me, but I just want to, chill. And 3 of my other girlfriends decided to stay with me, even though I insisted that they, get their money's worth and they, go see everything that they could possibly see. They were insisting on staying with me. And so we sat at this cafe in Mykonos, right overlooking the water, for that evening, watching a sunset, this beautiful sunset on the Mediterranean. And it was my first time that I ever had a crepe. So my first crepe that I ever had was in Greece, chocolate and strawberries and bananas. And it was just like, just heaven, just absolutely orgasmic. Like, all of us just had chocolate all over our faces. It was one of the best things we ever had. And we're just laughing and talking. And again, like, still all of us to this day, that is one of all of our favorite memories, by just going with the flow and saying, you know what, like, I'm going to listen to my gut. I'm tired. I'm just going to sit here and enjoy myself. I don't have to be jumping around trying to go to every single attraction and making the most of every single second, because sometimes the best moments are when you're just being at that place. And I love that.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back to transportation, the trains in Germany. Did you just do local trains, or were you on some of the longer trips?
I did do some of the longer trips because I also went was I in Munich? I went to Munich to Amsterdam. So I did a slightly longer train ride.
So were the restrooms accessible on the train?
They did have an accessible, yes, it was quite small. I would say if you had a power chair, like, depending on the size of it, it was definitely real tight. So maybe you may not have any maneuverability, but I think that for generally a lot of power chairs still would fit in that bathroom, especially the European style power chairs.
Yeah, because that's one of the things, that's always a challenge is, because you get on public transportation, or, it's like I was talking with a lady on American Cruise Lines, which that video is coming up today. And she was talking about, that they do tour buses. And the thought that came to my mind is, okay, what are the odds that the bathroom on the tour bus is accessible? And I would say probably it's close to zero.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm here.
That's fine. So I'm just, that's why I thought, let me ask that now. My wife and I've taken Amtrak, and Amtrak
Tour buses, I think, are the most challenging. Yeah, tour buses still, like, are not accessible. Like, I still have not seen, like, an accessible tour bus that has an accessible bathroom in it ever. I mean, I always have to be, like, lifted or, like, helped, to some degree.
Yeah. It was interesting. I did an interview with, and this might be something that interests you at some point in time. I did an interview with the Rocky Mountaineer Railway, and what they are is a tour company that does tours. You don't actually, you don't sleep on the train. The train goes a ways and stops, and you go to a hotel. But they had some of their tours that they had available were accessible. They had like Dodge Sprinter vans that had ramps, or a way to get a wheelchair in and out.
Yeah.
Either ramps or lifts, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I wish there was more of that. I mean, that's actually kind of a pet peeve of mine at hotels in the US, for example, that they have, oh yeah, so we have a shuttle service, to get you from here to there, to get you downtown, from the airport or whatnot. But 99.99999% of all of these shuttles I've never seen to be accessible. There was one in Talkeetna, Alaska that was, and I just lost it. I literally lost my shit because I just never, that was the first one that I had ever seen before. And I'm like, what? Like, how? Like, I just couldn't wrap my brain around it. And the driver thought that I was mental because he's like, yeah, isn't this the law? Isn't this, isn't this what we're supposed to do? And I'm like, yeah, it is. But a lot
But
of
you're the
people
only
don't.
one. You're the only one that knows that. You and I. Um,
Yeah.
did you say you had taken the Alaskan Railway?
I did. Oh my gosh, that was absolutely epic. That's something, and I definitely recommend if you love nature. Oh gosh, that was absolutely spectacular
And accessible, which is
and accessible.
yeah.
An accessible bathroom, and access to get you to the second floor, which I also was just blown away by. I was not expecting that at all. Elevator to get you to the top floor. What? Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty cool.
And that's the way the Rocky Mountaineer is too. Is they have in Canada they have elevators to get people to the second floor, or in the U.S. they have it's a single level. But again they have elevators. They have ways to make sure you can get on and off the train. Did you go to Seward?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Seward was the coolest because they had the manual elevator where they cranked you down,
Yeah.
and cranked you back up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. They actually have one of those in Santa Cruz to go through the Santa Cruz Mountains. They have this train ride that you get on at the boardwalk. It's this super old school train ride. And you wouldn't think that it's accessible, but they do have two open air cars. They have, one of these old school manual cranks that can get people in wheelchairs, on the ride. And so they take them into the mountains, to this one spot where people can picnic, and then there's like a couple trails and stuff that people can go exploring and whatnot. So yeah, those old school cranks are really cool. And actually, there's one also here in California for the Napa train as well. The Napa has an authentic super old train as well. You can dine on the train. Bathrooms are not accessible, so you definitely have to plan accordingly, but the whole train ride I think is 2.5 hours, so if you can just not drink so much, wine and water and plan accordingly, it's definitely possible, and just a beautiful train ride. But yeah, that authentic old hand crank, man, that's just, that is so cool, and it's so fun to watch them operate it.
Yeah, I was tickled. I thought Seward was a nice town too because I didn't run into anything that we had any troubles with. In fact, we stayed at the Harbor 360 Inn, which was a very nice property, and we walked from. Well, let me rephrase that. My wife rolled, I walked and pushed her from the Sea Life Center, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Up over the hill back down, and I mean it was a little bit of a slog, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah, I think that's the only hill really.
Yeah. So I thought Seward was a nice town. We had good experiences in Alaska in general. We stayed at a brand new property, which had a really nice. It was close to the airport. It was one of the Holiday Inn suite properties. I forget right now, but that was had a really nice room and plenty of space, roll-in shower.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
those
I mean,
kinds of.
Alaska, I think in terms of tourism and accessibility, I think it's just from, the older crowd, that have been continuously going up there, who kind of paved the way, like, so to speak, to get the ball rolling in that. But Alaska tourism, man, they got it going on. They really do. They've really thought about things. Of course, nothing is perfect, but, on a sliding scale, they're definitely like high up there, definitely like an 8.5 or like a 9. Like they've really tried and really thought things through.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. We did a tour in Ketchikan, where we went into this rainforest, and again, it would have been more of a challenge for you, being stuck in a wheelchair. But for my wife, she never had more than a couple of steps. But the tide changes, they have huge tide changes, like 7 or 8 feet. So when we were going back, they actually sent like a cart, like a 4-wheel drive utility vehicle with the place where she could sit on the back, and then I pushed her wheelchair up. But on the other side, they'd actually helped me push and pull the wheelchair up the ramp because it was so steep. So again, like I said, Alaska's pretty good. I enjoy that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a place to go.
Anywhere else you've been overseas that you thought was interesting and worked well? Or did we?
Well, interesting is one thing. Working well is a different factor. I was actually, I mean, surprisingly, like Japan completely blew me away in terms of accessibility. I mean, their transportation system, their train transportation system alone gets like 10 stars from me. Just if there's an 11 points, like I'll give them an 11, because New York, Chicago, some of these places in the United States, their train system, they have something to learn from this Japanese train system, where I could literally roll into the train system, go to the ticket kiosk, train attendant says, oh, would you like help today? Help not today, to get to the platform. And I got in the habit of always just saying yes, because they would just easily direct me where I wanted to go instead of me figuring it out, which actually it's all color coded and numbered. Once you figure out the system, it is designed so brilliantly. But I kind of like the interaction too, and just to kind of test, the accessible features of the Japan stations. And so the train attendant, like I said, asked me if I needed help and would lead me down to the appropriate platform. And he would get out a ramp, lay it down when the train arrived. I would wheel onto the train, and then he would ask me, okay, so where are you getting off at? And I would tell him, oh, I'm going to this station or this station. He would get on the radio and call ahead and say, hey, I have a lady in car 6, needs she has a wheelchair. Every single time, there was always a person there with a ramp, laid it out for me, where I got off immediately. Never a hiccup, a problem, a moment of pause. And the moment that I rolled off, the train attendant would be like, okay, where are you trying to go? Are you trying to go to an attraction or somewhere to eat? And they would direct me to the appropriate elevator in the station, for the easiest way to get then, to that attraction, so I wasn't confused at all. It was just hands down one of the best experiences that I've had at accessibility. And actually, I take that back. And then being led through the station one time, I remember, trying to get to a platform. I was with the train attendant, and the guy was just like, okay, just wait a second. And he had me sit in front of an escalator, and I was kind of confused. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do here? What's going to happen here? I can't go down this escalator. He pushes a button, and the escalator platform, some of the steps merged together to form a wheelchair platform that I could wheel onto. He pushed the button again, and the escalator continued to roll down. What? I've never seen anything like that ever, anywhere. Just brilliant. So brilliant. I loved it. So just the efficiency of just the flow of traffic, making sure everybody is okay, they have what they need, where they need to go, was fantastic. Maybe I couldn't get into every single, restaurant and shop, like on the face of the earth in Japan, but I never went hungry. There was always places that I could find a place to eat at that I could fit in. And they had, little convenience markets everywhere, which were delicious. Not like here in the United States, where sometimes there'll be hot dogs that are super questionable, that have been sitting out for maybe like a month or something. There they had like fresh sandwiches, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, little grab and go sushi balls, just really tasty, healthy things to eat. Absolutely fantastic. So I never worried anywhere that I went that I would not know how to get back, or that I would go hungry, or not be able to find a restroom, because if you could find a train station, you could always find an accessible bathroom. Always. Every train station had an accessible bathroom. And what I loved about Japan was that there was only one time that I found somebody basically like violating a handicap stall by using it, even though he didn't actually need it. And it was so funny, because I was waiting at the handicap stall, knocking and just waiting. And there was a camera, I guess, that was watching me too, waiting for the stall. And there was a security guard that, came out and knocked on the door too, and was talking to the gentleman who was in there, who I guess he hurried up and finished his business. And even before I was allowed to go into that bathroom, the guard was just like, no, wait, give me 2 minutes. And he steam cleaned the whole bathroom for me before I went in there to use it. I mean, it was incredible. So I never had to wait for a handicap stall here in the United States. I mean, almost always, even if there's like 20 stalls, everybody goes to that handicap stall for the most part in the United States. If there's 2 people who need to use the bathroom, like that handicap stall, one of them is going to be used. I always have to wait to use the bathroom in the United States, more so than not. But in Japan, oh my gosh, it was just heartwarming and just incredible that nobody abused it. And nobody abused elevators as well. It was just like, only if you had just a massive amounts of luggage or super obvious that you really needed to use an elevator, would they actually use it. I remember seeing countless times elderly people, with canes, walking up not just a couple flight of stairs, but like 50, a good deck of stairs, in a train station, and they were going real slow. But who cares? They're doing their exercise, taking their time. They got it. They're going to use it, and they're going to live a lot longer because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish people on cruise ships would learn that about elevators. Have you ever been on a cruise?
Yeah. That's definitely, I think, the epitome of a nightmare. Well, cruises and casinos, I would say, are really bad.
Yeah. My wife and I have gotten to the point that sometimes with her chair, after you've had people run around you 2 or 3 times, we're like, okay, I'm sorry, we're going on this next elevator, and I would just create a roadblock that the people behind me couldn't get around.
It's like
people off.
It's crazy to me because you're waiting in front of the elevator and you're not just watching the elevator like it's a TV program. You're actually trying to get on the elevator. You're not just hanging out because you like elevators and it's fun to hang out by the elevator. You want to actually get on the elevator. And it's so funny, yes, how people rush and just push around you. And it's like, wait, no, I'm trying to wait for the people to get off the elevator first and then go on, which is the proper elevator etiquette as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But, we do our best.
Since they won't let me take a cattle prod on board, I just have gotten where I am more aggressive than I would be in normal life to make sure that we get on the elevator eventually.
You have to be your own advocate. I mean, I always say first, like, kindness is key. You can get so much farther with that, but you also have to be your own advocate and be assertive. You don't have to be like a jerk. You don't have to fight people or call people names, because that's just, adds a bunch of bad energy and juju to everybody, but just speak up and be firm with what you need. Be like, I need to get on this elevator next. You need to wait.
Yeah, you need to wait. I'm talking about all 40 of you.
You need to wait, or you need to use your little legs and walk down the stairs. That's what needs to happen.
Yeah. Oh, anyway, it's so interesting. So where's the worst place you've been for travel with a wheelchair?
Ooh, in the world or the United States?
Let's go to world.
The world. Well, South America definitely still is high on the challenging aspects. Just for the fact that I feel like finding an accessible bathroom, while you're just like out and about is the biggest factor. If you can't, especially if you can't walk or stand like a little tiny bit or take a step or two, and you need to be able to like have your wheelchair get right up to the toilet and transfer, it can definitely be challenging. Not impossible, but definitely challenging. And especially in South America, you want to be with a tour guide of some kind, or having somebody, that knows the areas, back roads, driving, etiquette, language. Because there was times where, I needed to go, and a lot of time in South America, I relied on gas stations. Gas stations in terms of, in public, those were the most accessible restrooms. Occasionally, big attractions might have an accessible bathroom or one that's big enough to actually get in, but gas stations were primarily the most accessible. But there definitely were times where, it had been like 4 hours and we were out in the middle of the jungle and there was no gas station like around us. And so we had to just go to various hotels and like resorts and villas saying like, hey, like, here's the situation, like, do you have an open room that this gal could use? And there was actually a couple times that luckily, the hotel was really nice that I actually used somebody's physical room, you know, and use the bathroom in it. And of course they like cleaned it afterwards, I hope. Well, not that I made a big mess or anything, but you know,
Yeah.
I would want somebody to clean it before I used it. Yeah, so you just have to kind of, you know, think on your feet, being like, okay, where could there be an accessible bathroom? So even though maybe a hotel doesn't have an ADA accessible bathroom, but maybe they might let us into a room where I don't have to have every single door closed and I can just do my business, you know, like in my own private space, and then be on my way. So it's definitely something to consider when traveling, you know, to South America. But I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with traveling to South America, and I'm going to keep trying to find different ways to travel to South America, because I just love it. I love the food. I love the culture. I love the energy. Oh, it's just the beauty, the nature, all of it. I just absolutely adore it. So I want to experience more of it, but definitely is challenging, hands down.
Okay, so I gotta get your Amtrak story to Seattle. So you want to tell us a little bit about what happened? She told me this story when I first talked with her, and I thought this was kind of interesting. So, and there's a lesson to learn from this one.
So, I wanted to go to Vancouver, Canada, and I had never taken the Amtrak train in the United States yet. And I just started dating this guy. We've been dating for about 3 months, and I'm like, hey, want to go on a trip with me? And he had never been to Vancouver, Canada, and I had been raving about how accessible it was and wanted to show him. And so we decided to do it. And I looked online and saw that there was an accessible car and everything like that. So I booked the accessible car, and there was an accessible bathroom, and didn't really give it much thought after that. And so we arrive and we get to our car and find out though that this car, this, I don't know, 10 by 10 box, maybe not that small, but it was quite small. This little tiny car area was going to be our everything for the next 24 plus hours, which was quite a lot. So, you know, in the Amtrak car, there's 2 bunk beds, but both me and my boyfriend actually are in wheelchairs, so nobody could get to the top bunk. So we both actually had to cram like sardines on the bottom bunk, you know, head to toe, make that work somehow. We would use one of our wheelchairs, you know, kind of propped up next to the bed and kind of hang our legs kind of on that as well. But it was definitely squished. And then, of course, you know, anytime we had to go to the bathroom, all we had was just a curtain to separate us from our business. So, needless to say, me and my boyfriend really got to know each other on this trip. And the first like couple hours, I was kind of panicking because I kind of was realizing what the situation was, that we weren't going to be able to, you know, it wasn't going to be like the Hollywood movies where we could go to the dining car and have a cocktail and dine and come back to our room. No. We were literally trapped in that room, and we couldn't maneuver around at all. There was no maneuvering space. So it was literally just sitting on the bed or sitting in our wheelchair. That's it. There was no maneuvering around. And so that was pretty stuck. And our food would be delivered to us, which was actually so fantastic. I was not expecting how good the food was going to be. I thought it was going to be comparable to airline food, but it was definitely a number of notches above that, which was very helpful indeed to have such a nice meal to look forward to. And the staff was just absolutely incredible, and they understood our situation, so they definitely tried to make everything, you know, as accommodating as possible for us. And actually, there was one time, which I didn't tell you this the other day, that I really wanted to get a breather one time, just because I was, you know, being all confined in the space. And so there was one time that we made a stop at a train station. I'm like, screw it, like I need to get off this train. Like, I know this is not my stop, but like I need to get off this train. The train attendant was nice enough, you know, she was like, okay, I understand, like, you know, we're gonna let you off, but she's like, don't go very far, you know, because, you know, the train's going to leave and blah, blah, blah. And they make it very clear at the beginning, like if you get off the train, they will not stop for anybody. And so I got off and I was just, like talking to people and whatnot. And I hear the train blowing and I'm making my way back and I hear it like keep blowing. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound good. And all of a sudden I realized the people that I was talking to weren't people that were on the train. So they weren't worried about getting back on the train at all. And I thought that they were, so that we were all kind of on the same page. And, train was blowing and I'm racing to get back to the car, and I see my train attendant come running at me. She's like, they're gonna leave you! They're gonna leave you! And she came and pushed me, gave me an extra push so we could rush back to the car, and I was able to get on the car, and thank God I wasn't left behind. But yes, so me and my boyfriend, only dating 3 months. I'm like, this is gonna make or break our relationship for sure, being confined like sardines in this tiny little box. And it was definitely uncomfortable at times, but we definitely came out stronger than ever.
Yeah. And so the takeaway for anybody that's listening is those Amtrak handicapped roomettes work fine for one person in a wheelchair and people that are mobile, not for two people in a wheelchair.
Well, I mean, it can work, but just be prepared that one of the wheelchairs is not even gonna be able to fit in the room. We had to take apart one wheelchair, so that wheelchair didn't even exist. And then you just have the one wheelchair sitting in the room, and it is tight. It is a tight, tight, tight quarter for sure. So, I mean, maybe if you're not going 24 hours, it could definitely be more reasonable, but 24 hours definitely was a test. But it was, it was an adventure. I have absolutely no regrets. I have awesome memories from it, and life is an adventure, and you gotta have those hiccups every once in a while. Gotta ruffle up those feathers, otherwise you don't know what you're willing to put up with, right?
Yep. My wife and I, we have adventures more than we have trips sometimes.
Yeah,
and it's one of those things we have to warn our friends that if they're going to travel with us, that they can expect unusual things to happen. We did a train trip in Mexico and wound up spending one night in the train station because it was cleaner than the hotel we'd stayed at the night before, and we were only going to be there for 4 hours. So we're like, okay, we can do this. I have cooked.
Oh yeah. When people travel with me, like they're amazed, and they're amazed in the United States and then abroad, even like in Australia or New Zealand, like people think things are so accessible. It's 100% accessible. There's no problems. But then they actually travel with me and they're like, oh, wait. Well, this isn't supposed to be like this. Oh, this is very difficult. Oh, and it definitely opens up their eyes for sure on some of these loopholes in terms of the ADA laws.
Yeah. So you have to tell the story about the handicapped bathroom on the boat.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So recently, I was in New Zealand and was in the Milford Sound wanting to go on the cruise boat because it's one of the things to do when you're there. You either go on a plane flight or take a cruise boat. So I did the cruise tour and did my research ahead of time, found that there was actually a boat that had a bathroom on board that was accessible. There was other boats that still created access. They had ramps, and they were like big enough and they had space on board and so on for wheelchair access. But this one company said, yes, we have a wheelchair accessible bathroom, and was even able to find a picture, of the door. So I'm like, oh wow, this is great. And the tour was only like maybe 2 hours, something like that. It wasn't terribly long. So chances were I wasn't going to have to use the bathroom, but just in case when nature calls, it's nice to have, especially if you're in the middle of water somewhere. And so I'm on the boat, and just for research purposes, just out of curiosity, I wanted to see the bathroom. Again, just for research purposes, so I could take pictures of it, so I could really show people kind of how big it is and really gauge what the situation was. But then I was told that yes, they do have an accessible bathroom, but there's like a step that's like 2.5 feet, high that I have to be able to jump over. So that to me isn't very accessible. But yes, the bathroom had grab bars and it was big enough. So it's like if I could jump over that one barrier, then it could work. And for some reason, they didn't have ramp that could go up and down it, to make it accessible, which I feel like they could have customized something to make that work. But even a piece of wood, 2 pieces of wood, I mean, just makeshift anything to make it possible. I mean, I would have definitely used that over nothing. But yeah, I mean, just really, really silly things like that are definitely good to know. But that's why we do what we do, so people actually know what the real deal is, because people wave their flag and say, oh yes, we're accessible, we're accessible. What exactly does that mean? We'll tell you.
Exactly. And do you have pictures? I just got some video back from this gentleman that had done a tour for me in Mexico. He walked around with his cell phone showing me, and in their idea of accessible, the one thing that they didn't think about is in the accessible room that they have, which was, everything was pretty nice, roll-in shower and everything. They only have one grab bar on the wall by the toilet.
Yeah.
Which, I'm like, okay, because on the cruise ship, that's one of the things that's pretty cool, is they have a bar that drops down on one side, and so you have both sides if you need both sides, because sometimes you got it, you need both sides.
The drop down design, I absolutely love. I've seen that in Europe, and I saw that in Japan, and I think that's absolutely brilliant, because maybe you just need on one side, maybe you don't need it all, maybe you want both of them, maybe you want them both transferring onto the toilet, maybe you don't want them at all transferring on, but you want them both to get off the toilet. There's all these different scenarios, in people's situations, so that just allows people to adapt, so to make it accessible for their needs. Absolutely brilliant design.
Yeah, it is. I love that. So okay, I had forgotten you said you've been to Australia and New Zealand, so tell me about the world down under and how life is.
Australia and New Zealand overall are really accessible. I would say, in terms of, comparison, it's very comparable to the United States, in terms of like curb cutouts and be able to finding hotels that have a roll-in shower and handheld shower nozzle and whatnot. The devil's always in the details, though, whether or not, like, the shower bench is on one side and then the nozzle is on the other, and then you can't really reach it when you're on the bench, kind of thing. But yeah, transportation is also good. Accessible taxis and ferries and that kind of a thing. I definitely feel like parks could have a little bit more accessibility. I mean, there's still a bunch of trails that are flat enough and firm enough that I still deem accessible, at least to a certain point, where you can get out in nature and explore and go hiking and so on. But I still feel that there's more that could be done in terms of creating access, like picnic tables and bathrooms and water fountains, just some of the basic amenities that everybody else uses and relies on when they go to parks, like bathrooms, drinking fountains, maps, like where to go and what's accessible, just in order to make your experience just like everybody else. So you're not, wandering around just trying to find what's accessible, wasting all your time just looking. You can actually go to the park and enjoy it. But I would say, yeah, that New Zealand, I think it's the department of Agriculture, I believe. Can't think it off the top of my head. The Department of something in New Zealand, they have done a phenomenal job, absolutely phenomenal job, in terms of documenting accessible trails. I mean, just spectacular. Like, they have a map that's so easily readable based on regions, and then you can zoom in to see the different trails and like kind of get a feel for how long the trail is, what the gravel makeup is, about bathroom. Well, sometimes they know about bathrooms and such, but just really super user friendly. Like, I definitely utilize that website significantly when I was traveling around, and was so surprised on just how much was accessible in New Zealand. And they even had equipment rental companies, and I rented a car that had a ramp. I mean, there was a lot of really great opportunities in New Zealand. Absolutely one of my favorite trips, hands down, for sure. And in Australia also, I was really impressed with like generally getting around, like the flatness and curb cutouts and that kind of thing. The train system, I would say it would be comparable to what I experienced in Germany, where some stops were accessible and some stops weren't accessible. What kind of amazed me, though, which was a little baffling when I was in Melbourne, was that they had this downtown area. And for some reason, the downtown area, which was the one of the most heavily populated area for tourists and activities and whatnot, some of their main stations were not accessible, which just didn't make any sense to me, like whatsoever, that you had to go so far out of this main hub where you would want to go in order to, you know, get on the train to go get back to your hotel or whatnot. And I remember waiting on a platform one time with a friend of mine who's also in a chair, and him and I, you know, we've definitely experienced all sorts of levels of accessibility and inaccessibility. And he has a power chair. And all of a sudden, this gal with the stroller comes running up to us. Her eyes are all bug-eyed, and she was just like, I don't know how you could do it. I don't know, like, how do you stand it? I've been waiting here for 45 minutes for an accessible, you know, like first, you know, not an accessible, but for a step-free car that she could get into, because she had a big stroller and then she had like another little one whose hand she was holding. So she was waiting for that barrier-free access and she lost it. She was on the phone, you know, talking to, you know, the Department of Transportation, you know, like on the general line. And me and my friend just started laughing. We just started laughing and laughing and laughing, you know, and we, not at her, we definitely talked to her and said that we understood and whatnot. But once she moved away, we were cracking up because him and I have experienced this type of shit so often, like so often, that yes, on the website, the train will say like, yes, we're accessible. Oh wait, New York. So you are accessible for maybe like 10% of your stations. And oh wait, only 3% of stations actually have working elevators. You know, so all those types of little hiccups and things. So it's something that we've definitely experienced and have been experiencing. So him and I have so much patience, but it was kind of nice and refreshing to see an able-bodied person come up to us and just say like, oh my gosh, I understand somewhat what you go through. Like, how do you remain sane? And yeah, it's just kind of it was a nice compliment, I guess. Not intentionally, but you know, we took it that way.
Okay, well, you know what, I have loved our conversation, Ashley. I think we will have to do this again. Give you a chance to make a couple more trips somewhere interesting, and then we'll talk again about your most recent experience.
No, definitely. Lots of places to talk about, you know, lots of different sites around the US, the extraterrestrial highway. I mean, there's lots of things in the United States to check out.
Oh yeah, I'm a huge fan of the US. My wife and I have traveled. There's probably only a couple of states we haven't been in or through. We love, my wife and I love to travel, so we go where we can. For those that are listening, I appreciate you staying with us. If you haven't already done so, please hit the like and the subscribe buttons, so that way you'll get notified when I send out the next one, and YouTube will know there's some value in it. And I appreciate very much having you on today, Ashley.
Yep, happy to be here and look forward to coming back on next time.
Okay, and we're done. Thank you.
Happy travels, everyone.
Yeah, that was very, very good. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
My cheeks, my jaw hurts from talking. I always try to get so much information, and then like I think about, you know, all these little like side stories and I'm like, oh wait, that's a good tip. Ooh, wait, yeah. So well, yeah, there's so much more that I could talk about. If that wasn't clear, if you didn't get that memo, if that wasn't obvious, yeah.
No, we will. Like I said, we'll do some more. And actually, I'll probably do this as one long video, and then I'll slice it. I probably will do Greece, Germany, and Alaska, and Japan, and New Zealand, all as little short mini pieces too. I'll slice the top and the bottom.
I don't know if this is something that you're interested in. I don't know if it's like kind of part of your storytelling, but when I was in New Zealand, actually on the second to last day that I was leaving, I was actually in a really bad car accident. I was out in the middle of nowhere, and on like a dirt road, which I'd been on many times before, but for some reason it was like this perfect scenario storm. where I turned right and my car started sliding and was trying to stay in the middle of the road, but the car was so heavy and the cross slope just forced me to one side, which then had my wheel hit this divot, this dirt divot on the side of the road, which then hoisted me into the air and went flying into the air. And then I blacked out for a second. And then I woke up to the car still rolling because there was like a ravine farmland beside me. And then it was rolling. And then I was thinking how I had to crawl up in and out of the window, save myself. But luckily the car landed upright. Airbags didn't deploy. The car still worked. So I was able to drive around, find a gate, get out of the car, get to the gate latch, which was very difficult. Literally cliffhanger style, like climbing rings, like to get up. Barely could open up the latch to get to the gate. Gate knocked me out of my wheelchair, threw the wheelchair back in the car, climbed up in the car, and then tried to go up the hill. Car couldn't make it, so then I basically had to crawl up this ravine. Had my backpack, a jacket, a little bit of water that I had left, climbed up the ravine. When I was on the top of the ravine, saw that there was, a barn and a shed. So worst case scenario, I was planning on sleeping there that night if nobody saw me because I hadn't seen or heard any cars yet. And I knew I was going to be rescued. Like I knew eventually somebody would find me. I just had to like survive, like get to the road or whatnot. So if I was planning the next day, if nobody were to find me, I was just going to be crawling down the road. I know eventually somebody would find me, but luckily I was like 75% across this, this meadow, because I had to get to the road because where the barn and all this bush were set up, nobody would see me from the road because the grass was so high and I was on the ground. So I had to get to the road so somebody could see me. And I heard a car drive by and I was screaming and bloody murder for help and waving my bag up in the air so they could see it. By the grace of God, the guy's car window was down, heard me. The group of 4 people came running out. They were government workers that were out in the middle of nowhere measuring pond scum. And so they were just leaving for the day. They came running out and I'm like, hey, I'm paralyzed, but it's okay. I've been paralyzed for 20 years and that's why I'm on the ground. And then I just collapsed and then they came running over and they're like, so do you want us to get your wheelchair? I'm like, yes, let's start with that. Please go get the wheelchair out of the car. And then they got me and went back to the hotel. And next day went to the doctors, just to make sure because I was flying to Melbourne the next day. Want to make sure I was okay to fly. And the doctor was just like, what just happened to you? And you're here talking to me? Yes, you're perfectly fine to go flying right now. And so got on the airplane and flew off. But insurance was fantastic because I had like the top coverage. So I didn't pay anything. Honestly, it's like the airbag didn't deploy. So if we're going to tell me to pay something, I would have, taken some legal actions. But yeah, like the farmer immediately, pulled it up to the road so people could collect it. And I gave everybody the keys and I was off. And then the corona thing happened. And then, I went to Melbourne and all the coronavirus stuff was happening. And everybody's like, ah! And I'm like, dude, if God wanted me to go, I would have already been dead. So yeah, this corona thing is not going to take me down. Like, I guarantee you that. It's just not. Like, I obviously have a mission to still do. Because I still don't know how, like, the many times I rolled. Oh yeah, so when the car launched off in a direction differently from how it landed. So I still don't know how it launched and then rolled and then flipped to go the other way and landed the other way. So yeah, I'm like, I don't know how I'm still here, but I'm here and still have a mission. And yeah, so I don't know if that's something that's a good story, but it's a hell of a good story.
It is a good story. I hadn't shut my recorder off, so we'll tell that story too.
Yeah. I can tell that story in a lot better fashion. I was kind of giving you like the Cliff Notes version, but I can definitely tell that story a lot better.
Well, maybe we'll come back and revisit that story. I was going to tell you, you're talking about the train. We were on a train trip. And this was an adventure. It was where we slept in the train station. Yeah. But at one point in time, the train stopped in this town, and a friend of mine and I got off. There was about 10 of us traveling together with, maybe 14 of us. And his wife stayed on board. My wife stayed on board. And he and I, we were tired of drinking Mexican soda pops, which are like really high sugar.
Sugar, yeah.
Yeah. And we're like, there's a bar. Let's go get a beer. So we went to the bar. I had my son, who was about 4 or 5 at the time. We went and got a beer. And we're sitting there, and we're thrifty people. So it was 1,000 pesos if you drank the beer there. It was 2,000 pesos if you took the beer with you. So we were sitting there drinking the beer, and that noise, we heard the psh sound, and we thought we heard women screaming. And we're like, we should finish this beer and hurry and finish up. So we slammed the rest of the beer, and it was really funny because we go out and the train is leaving.
Oh no!
And his wife and my wife are on the back of the train, and
Screaming.
My wife is screaming. His wife is just laughing because she thinks it's funny. So it's like any bad movie you've ever seen where I'm chasing a train with my son. And he's only hitting the ground about every 10 feet because I'm running as fast as I can. And they never did stop the train. They slowed the train down enough that we could get, on, but they never ever stopped the train. So.
Oh, that's straight up out of the movie.
Yeah, it is.
You got to catch the train like a real movie star. How fun.
I would give anything to have that video. And then
right? Oh yeah,